Hello again, I'm John Ballantyne, and this is On the Marquee. And I want to thank our sponsors today, Dr. John Cox from We Ones Pediatrics and the Photo Place over in Austintown. Our guest today is a familiar face here at the Playhouse. She is found both on stage and off stage, and basically wherever something needs to be done, you will find Candace DiLullo. Candy, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, you have been here a long time.
A long time.
I don't even remember, I mean, as long back as I can remember, like the early 2000s. What initially brought you here?
I actually started coming down when I was 12, so that was about 1997, but I was just mostly backstage doing youth theater classes, things like that. One of my earliest memories was being here when I was in preschool. We came for a field trip, and we saw Hans Christian Andersen.
Okay.
I think it was written by Bernie.
Could have been, yeah.
I believe so.
Mm-hmm. I think that was about the time frame he was here.
Right, and I just remember, first of all, I was very small, I was like 5, so I remember everything just being so big and grand, and there was like a fountain on stage, and there were all these kids involved in everything, and I thought, wow, what a magical place, you know, to be involved in, and I'm a very shy person. Nobody believes that of me because I've done theater, but I'm very, very shy, and even more so when I was younger. And so, like, to kind of break that shyness, I got involved in classes, and then got involved in crew, and then just progressed from there. So really just like that early memory of being here with my mom. Like, I remember my outfit was like black and white gingham and everything. I remember everything about it, and it made such an impact on me. It was just like, that's the place where I want to be. I didn't have a lot of friends in school because I was so shy, and so I came down here, and it was a place to belong, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, now that kind of answers probably part of my next question, and that is, what is it about theater, about acting, that makes someone like you want to be an actor?
It's the magic of it, really. It's, you know, there's so much stress that goes into it, and it's just such a disjointed thing, like while you're in the rehearsal process of it, and then once it comes together, the feeling of unity, the feeling of community, and just knowing that you're presenting something that is going to affect somebody one way or another. It's inspiring to me, and it's something that I, you know, held on to, I grabbed onto, and it's just that adrenaline rush and everything like that. That's really what got me to stay so long. Mm-hmm. You become addicted to that adrenaline.
Yeah, you do.
Absolutely. Yes.
Now, you've been involved both with the main theater and the youth theater. Mm-hmm. What are the different rewards that you get from each type of those?
Seeing kids grow is extremely rewarding. You know, you may have a kid that comes in and gets it, knows right off the bat and everything like that, and then you have some that you have to kind of work with, and you have to like foster them a little bit, and you have to like pull it out of them, and it becomes this, you know, you see yourself in them, mm-hmm. And you get the sense of them looking up to you and things like that, and being able to pass along the knowledge that you've worked so hard for. You know, a lot of times community theaters kind of looked down upon a little bit because we're amateurs, but seeing kids grow, learn more about themselves, and then use what they learn here, even if they don't go into theater, to use what they learned here to go into whatever field they're going into. It's really inspiring. I mean, it makes you feel a little old, but you know, it's really rewarding to see, you know, somebody from a very young age go through all of the steps of life and then, you know, become an adult. Working with adults is a little different. You know, a lot of times, you know, in terms of directing, you know, people come in with their own egos, with their own knowledge and everything like that. So it can be a little bit of a struggle, but I learned what I learned from watching, you know, Molly Galano, John Cox, Dave Hatton, being involved in crew where you're the stage manager, Jack, things like that. So getting to take some of their knowledge is what I loved the most about working with the adults.
I know a lot of people who work with youth theater. One of the comments they make is what a child gets from his first experience on stage to when, like, if he stays and does a number of shows, and as he gets older he does, you know, more and more roles. how that develops his character and how that changes personalities totally from what the kid was when he initially came in. Can you kind of address that? Or
well, and as I mentioned previously about myself, I came in as a very, very shy girl, and through doing classes, working backstage, and then being on stage myself, I kind of broke through that shyness. It's still there, but it's not what people see in me. Nobody looks at me and says, "Oh, that's a really shy person." It's it's internalized a lot. So I know from my personal experience, I've grown and I've become a different person through just learning how to be silly, really. I mean, because that's the good. You start off as a kid, and the last thing you want to do is really stand out, especially if you're in that awkward phase where like the 11 to 13 age group where everything is strange and awkward and new. And you come to a place where it's like, no, you need to be silly. You need to stand out. You need to, like let down your guard, and because the more guards you have up, the less genuine your performance is. Right. So it's a freedom, and I think that's really what changes people in their personality is when you're in school, you have to be a certain way. You don't want to really stand out. That can be disruptive and things like that. But here, the disruption is almost celebrated a little bit. Oh yeah. And that is a freedom that we're given. We don't get that at work. We don't get that at school. You don't get it at church. No. You need to fit a mold in those places. And here it's about not fitting the mold. And I think that's a big thing in terms of development in children.
Mm-hmm. Now everybody, and we have a lot of fun with this question because we've gotten some great responses. Everybody who's done shows here, whether it be backstage, on stage, wherever, has great stories about either something that happened on stage, backstage. Does anything come to mind?
When I did Blithe Spirit, the lights went out. And the entire second act was dependent on light tricks. But the board just, can I swear? No? The board just shit the bed. It was really humid, and I feel like when it's humid outside, the board, or at least one of the boards of years gone by, just didn't do well with it. So there was that. On top of it, I was the maid in that show, and I had a lot of bits that I would do to do scene changes. It wasn't just the crew coming out, getting the set and changing it. It was me as the maid, falling over chairs and taking a tray and putting it back there, eating somebody's toast or whatever, things like that. There was a point where one of the characters was supposed to throw a glass and it was supposed to shatter, and I was supposed to come clean it up. It never broke. So the bit was kind of lost. On the last day, when everything was going wrong with the lights and everything like that, this glass shattered into a million pieces. Mm-hmm. We had, I think Cheryl Lyko Games was barefoot, so there's glass everywhere on the stage. They hand me this tiny little dust and broom thing, the dustpan and broom, and I literally went out and I scooped it like this, and a quarter of it was scooped up and the entire pan was full. And this is a scene change. This isn't a scene. It's literally, it's supposed to be in the dark. And I just stood there and I was like, I looked at the audience and I was like, I think we might need a bigger broom. And then I went back off stage, dumped the glass, came back out, and I had the stage broom. And I literally just had to take the stage broom and get as much glass. And it became like an act in and of itself, cleaning up this stupid stuff.
I had heard part of that story someplace else. I forget who told me that part of that story, but and now something crazy had to have happened during Noise is Off, because that is a crazy show to begin with.
Oh yeah, but I mean, I think what the craziest thing was is that we all survived it. Oh yeah. It's 3 acts. There is never a lull in anything. I really don't remember anything any huge faux pas going on backstage or anything like that. I mean, I remember a lot of people complaining about their knees. Mm-hmm. I hurt my lower back. My shoulder is still a little messed up from it and things like that. And just from running up and down the stairs, we would get to the 3rd act and I would get up to the top of those stairs and my head, I thought I was going to pass out. There was a bit where I had to grab onto Paul Dahman And literally, like, I had to grab on to Paul Dahman or else I was going to like fall over. I mean, the luckiest thing is that I was half naked in the show because it was so hot and just running everywhere, up and down, and like, what act are we even in? I don't know. What way is the stage facing? Who knows? Things like that. So really, for me, the biggest thing was trying not to pass out every night.
Yeah, it's an active thing. Very active. Now, you were very close with Joe Scarvell.
Yes.
How did that come about, and what all did you learn from him during the years that you worked with him?
The first show I did with Joe, and I'm going to try really hard not to cry, because he's staring at me too over there.
Yes, right.
The first show I did with Joe was Brighton Beach Memoirs. I was 19, just graduated from high school, and it was my first real role. I had only done like chorus stuff and musicals up until then. This is the first play I was in, which is where my talent lies. I'm not a singer at all. You may remember from my auditions for you. I'm not a singer at all, at all.
I didn't want to say it.
I could be in chorus, fine, you know, if you like keep my mic real low. But so I was really excited to become a serious actor. You know, somebody that like people admired, things like that. And the first rehearsal I had with him, where it was just him and I had a line that I had to say, and I hope the Scarvell family doesn't mind me bringing this up. I had a line I had to say where I wish I would get hit by a car. He had just recently gone through an extremely big heartbreak with his granddaughter, who was hit by a car. I had no idea about this, and I was kind of blowing the line off and things like that, and I remember him sitting me down and not giving me a line reading, but saying that line to me and feeling the pain, seeing the pain he was feeling without knowing anything about the situation. And I remember just being so taken aback by that. He wasn't performing, he was the director, and the way he said this line, I knew what he was going through internally without knowing anything. And that was inspiring to me. That was the thing that I was like, this guy knows what he's talking about. This guy knows what he's doing. I had heard stories about Joe and Huey for years before then, and he was, this titan to me. But to see it at work was extremely inspiring to me, and it like kind of solidified to me that I was on the right path because I got so excited while also sympathizing with this person. And every show he did, you learned a lot. You worked really hard, but he also made it so much fun. Anything he was involved with, it had to be fun, even if it was like a tough show to do, he would still make that time to have fun. And he also fostered relationships with literally everyone in the cast. It didn't matter if you had two lines and you like walked on and then walked off. I mean, he made sure you knew you were important. You knew he respected you. And I admire him for that. He's a true teacher. He's a true instructor. And not everybody is. It's not easy.
No.
But that's his core. That's who he was, and he loved teaching, and you could tell. And then from there, we house sat for them. We would watch their dogs when they would go to Europe and things like that, and just having conversations with him that didn't involve theater was extremely rewarding too. He helped me through a really difficult time in my life where I was dealing with depression and things, and I had never had someone of that generation have an open conversation about mental health with me. And that changed my life. It could have possibly saved my life too, because I was needing a conversation that nobody was wanting to have with me, and he introduced the conversation. He brought the conversation up, and I think he knew enough about me and he cared enough about me to recognize something in me and to openly address it, and exposing the vulnerabilities in himself as well. Right. And that I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that conversation with him on the back porch, and like I said, it could have possibly saved my life.
He had a unique quality. Okay, I want to take a quick break and thank our sponsors again for this edition of On the Marquee, Dr. John Cox at We One's Pediatrics and the Photo Place. I was gonna mention to you that Scarvell had that ability to get in your face, and he made it I mean, he did it in such a way that he cared about you and about the character you were doing. And I mentioned that to him in the interview. We interviewed him first when we started all these. And I said, "You're a very in-the-face kind of director." And his response was, "What do you mean? I don't get in anybody's face." So I thought that was kind of funny. Besides Joe, were there any other people here that kind of mentored you through the years?
I feel like everyone at some point was a bit of a mentor to me. Chris Fidrum, Dave L. Hatton, Molly Galano, John Cox. The person who comes to mind is David Gendry, because my worst audition ever and my best audition ever was with David. The first audition I had with him, which was terrible, was for Jekyll and Hyde. Again, I'm not a singer. And I walked in with kind of an apologetic attitude about my talent level and things like that, which does you no favors with David at all. And he literally, at the end of the audition, told me, "I don't know why you thought you were a strong enough talent to be in this show." And I had never had someone be so blunt with me, you know, because I was the kid that kind of came up and did whatever anybody would tell her to do. I feel like I had a lot of favors done for me and things like that. You know, people, you know, helped me out along the way. Whereas David was not that person. He was gonna let you know, like, oh, yeah. Like, "No, kid, you ain't got what it takes." And he did. He absolutely let me know, "You do not have the talent that this show is going to require." And all I wanted was a chorus role. That's all I asked for. And I remember, you know, the tears welling up in the middle of the audition, and I was just like, "Thank you for the opportunity." And I like ran out of that room, and I thought to myself, I'm never talking to him again. I'm never doing anything for that man again. But then, you know, we got to talking after shows or during an admission for shows and like things like that, exchanging ideas and thoughts and stuff like that. And then I ended up auditioning for him again for the 39 Steps, and that is one of probably my top 3 best auditions. Was the audition I gave for the 39 Steps, because I wanted it so bad. It was where I lived. I mean, I spent my high school career watching Alfred Hitchcock movies in my room by myself. So so it was something I really wanted and I really worked on. And I'm a decent character actor. I can do different voices and things like that. So yeah, I feel like David was a great mentor in the fact that he was honest with me, where I think maybe a lot of other people spared my feelings.
Well, yeah. I mean, what he said sounds a lot like John Kenley, so that's probably why he picked it up, because John was very blunt like that.
Okay, I didn't know John.
Yeah, he would. You knew you stood with John real quick. You mentioned shows like the 39 Steps. What are some of your favorite shows, favorite roles you've done?
The 39 Steps is probably, it's my favorite show I've done at the Playhouse. Angels in America, which was done at the Oakland, was one of my favorites as well. The Rabbit Hole, again, at the Oakland with Chris Fidrum. That's the first time I worked with Chris Fidrum. The Glass Menagerie at the Newcastle Playhouse. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf was, you know, a big undertaking and a really rewarding experience. I learned a lot through that. Noise is Off too, but really one of my favorite shows that I've done here was back in the Moyer Room, and it was Our Lady of 121st Street. That's the first time I worked with Maz in a show, and it was so different than anything I had ever done, and it was really a cool experience. Great show.
Okay. Now this next question, I ask this, I don't ask this of everybody, but we kind of space it out a little bit. Have you ever had a run-in with the Playhouse ghost?
You know, I've had like feelings basically where, you know, like, because I've been in this building by myself at night, which is a very not good thing to do for anybody. And yeah, I saw something, you know, everything was shut off, and I was at the bottom of the main stage steps, the steps to go into the auditorium, and I saw what I thought was a little girl walk into the elevator. Like, not into into the elevator door. Now granted, I was doing like a youth theater show in the morning and then working here in the afternoon and then rehearsing in the evening. It could be that I was just extremely tired, but I swear I had my back turned and I felt something and turned and looked up the steps, and I saw what I thought was a little girl walk into the elevator. As well, I was here, what did you say, with Jimmy Liebarger? It was either Jimmy or Paul Kimple, and it was just the two of us, and we heard like bells or something like that, and like we both just kind of looked at each other, and I think it was Jimmy, because I think he looked at me and said, okay, we're done for the day.
Yeah.
And we both just left because we don't know where those bells were coming from. So.
I've heard stories about a little girl that supposedly has been seen here. There's a number of people that have stories about that.
Yeah. Okay, I'm getting chills. Because I'm the only. I've never heard of anyone else saying a little girl. I've heard of other things, but that's. Ugh.
Yeah, yeah. The one I've heard is that people have experienced a little girl pinching them on the cheek, and you turn around, and of course, there's nobody there. You've been here long enough to see change in the Playhouse, obviously. Yep. Kind of try and compare the Playhouse when you first came with the Playhouse now. What's different about it?
A lot is different about it. When I first started coming down here, the lobby was completely different. It was divided up. Mm-hmm. I want to say there was a wall in between up there and back here. I remember there being a payphone back here. I think the bar was bigger. Am I correct?
I don't know if it was bigger.
Maybe I was just smaller.
Might have been in a little different place. Maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe the room being divided made it
look bigger. Yeah. Because I remember this was kind of like a lounge area, and up there was like, the where everybody hung out before they went upstairs. The elevator wasn't there. Backstage was completely different. Oh, yeah. There was, the two big dressing rooms up at the top, and then the two smaller ones down at the bottom. There was like that little hallway where you could use the restroom and things like that. I remember Jimmy's office, the tech director's office, was upstairs.
Well, I remember Paul Kimple's office was, as you look at the dressing rooms now, was to the left of the dressing room at one time.
Yep. And I don't know why. I remember having to go upstairs, but I was only in there like one or two times before the changes started coming. And I was actually doing shows while the renovations were going on, as I'm sure you remember. I think that was Idora.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of leading up to Idora.
How about not only just physically, but just the operation of the Playhouse too?
Well, I guess my perception of it, I was a kid when I first started coming down here, so I remember it being so professional when I first started down here, and then as I got I realized maybe it's not as professional as I thought it was. But I remember thinking, I have to be on my best behavior and things like that because this is big time, because the Playhouse was a big deal. I mean, it still is a big deal. Because it was the first and biggest gig in town, and then, there were more that came after. And so it was, if you did a show at the Playhouse,
Oh, you would have
you were a big deal, especially if your name was in the paper associated with it. I mean, that's bragging rights for grandma and grandpa and everything like that, it's a big deal. I think that's somewhat changed, and I don't want to poo-poo the Playhouse or anything like that, but I think it's kind of changed through the years of the Playhouse closing down, temporary coming back, things like that. I don't think it's what it used to be, but I don't think our views on entertainment are what they used to be. You used to want to go and sit in a theater or a movie theater for 3 hours. Now it's like, no, let's get it done in an hour and a half. Let's cut the intermission and just get on out of here. We got things to do. So, I mean, I don't want to say that the thoughts on the Playhouse have lessened. I think it's still considered a really big deal. But I remember as a kid thinking this was the Broadway of Youngstown.
Well, I think I know what you're talking about, because entertainment, I mean, at one time, this was the only game in town.
Oh, yeah.
With the exception of maybe TNT and maybe one or two others. But now, entertainment is so spread out, and everybody has so many different options that this isn't the only place to go anymore.
Right.
So I think that's facilitated a change, I think. Tell me a little bit about what you feel the importance of the Playhouse has been in Youngstown, and hopefully still is.
Well, I mean, this building has been here how long? It's a 59. So it's a historical monument, can we say, in Youngstown? Is that a bit, is that hyperbolic? I don't know. And you know, I feel like, you know, we're a depressed area. You know, we are kind of, you know, a joke. Yeah. A little bit, this in Youngstown in general, and I feel like, you know, the things that we have that are really valuable are, you know, the park, and our arts community. We are not a big city, and we have this very big, while also very small, theatrical community. I mean, you know, like you said, there's what, I mean, I want to say like 7 different theaters that...
Well, if you're taking the whole surrounding area,
yeah.
there's like 15 or 16.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, I mean, you know, what is it about this area that there are so many options for theater? Obviously, it's something we're good at. You know, I mean, why would there be so many options if not? So I think it's woven in the fabric of Youngstown that, you know, we're a place for the arts, you know. I wish the city would recognize that a little bit more and maybe give us a little more money. Yeah. But, you know, I think, like, if we continue to foster the young people and continue to teach the young people the history of this place and the surrounding theaters, it's only going to grow more, and maybe it'll get, you know, that recognition that it deserves as something that's it's a pillar in our community.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is. Now, as the Playhouse begins its second 100 years, and it's by the time people see this, it'll be closer to the 100th. What do you feel they need to do as they enter into the second 100 years to be successful?
The Playhouse, get more money, is always a thing. Which, you know, they've got, you know, Kayla Boy behind that, and she is phenomenal. She's a force to be reckoned with. I really think. You know, getting back into the schools. When I was a kid, the Playhouse used to do the traveling shows in the schools. I think that would be a big help. I know for me, when I was a kid, you know, my family was very much like, don't let her go down there, because, you know, I'm from Poland, and, you know, the thought of my parents letting me go run around in an old building on the south side was like, whoa, what are you thinking? And they would. My mom would drop me off, my dad would pick me up, and, you know, like, I was here doing my thing for a while. So I think getting the Playhouse back into the schools is something that they need to focus on, because it you know, there's still a little bit of a stigma with this area, and I think, you know, it provides, you know, the safety. You know, it shows like, here's a place for all of you to come, and if this is something that interests you, you know, you need to come down and see it. Young people's involvement in theater is going to be a big thing for the continuation of the Playhouse, because, you know, I hate to say it, a lot of our, you know, constant audience members are leaving us rapidly. From the last year, you know, we have our giants of the theater itself, and, you know, as well, audience members that are quickly passing. So we need to get the new audiences in here, the new actors in here, and as well, new shows. You know, we can't do Bye Bye Birdie every year, you know, or, you know, the old chestnuts that you know, are, I think the Playhouse is known for. Right. You know, we need to get new materials in here. We need to continue fostering the Moya room in the back there, because that's where kind of the more, you know, edgier pieces are done. Right. You know, maybe our audiences aren't ready for, you know, something like Angels in America upstairs, but you can let them dip their toe in the water back here in the Moya room with something like Venus and Turk.
Well, I think that's been done to a certain extent with more recent shows upstairs. It's drawing in audiences that are familiar with those, and we're staying a little bit away from Oklahoma and South Pacific. Not that there's anything wrong with them. You can't exist on those either. So. Well, Candy, our time is up, and I thank you for coming in. It was great talking to you. Good to see you, as always. And we'll talk to you again soon. And thank you for joining us for On the Marquee, and we will see you the next time. Bye-bye.